Thank you for coming out in the rain tonight. It's going to be worth it. Where else in Valparaiso can you get Kazakh food, which we do have for you, prepared on site, not ordered from a restaurant or anything. So,
as far as you know.
Get me in trouble there. So, you guys have heard of Cher and Pele, and now you'll know another single moniker famous person around the world, Zika. And Zika and I know each other from Special Olympics and from volleyball. She is a community go-getter. She's CEO of her own consulting firm in town here. She's come to Valparaiso in 2008. And her sister, Alina, who has also been living in Kazakhstan for a number of years, but was born here, is here today. Say hello, Alina.
Hi.
Yeah. And so that's Zika's sister. And so Zika's was a social worker for 15 years, and that's, I think, her connection with Special Olympics that just continues, and we appreciate her for that. Immigrants and lottery winners and migrants, sometimes, I'm not sure why, but sometimes there's a derogatory term for that, and then we always like to present the positives that come out of it. So someone like Zika comes and makes our community that much better, and we're thankful for that. So we are going to talk about some geography, some history, some religion, some food, all of that. As some of you that come regularly know, please hold your question and answers until the end, and then we'll moderate that, and there'll be plenty of time for that. Either way, we'll wrap up at about 8:30, and we'll get the chairs out of the way, we'll put tables out, and we can socialize, you can sign autographs at the end, right?
I have a stamp.
Pictures. How much do you charge for?
$250.
$250, and then if it's with a unbelievable. Speaking of pictures, those of you who saw our email invite, wasn't that a beautiful picture of Zika?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Yes, it was striking, in fact. But here she is in the flesh, and so remember,
A little
question
worse
and
than the flash, I guess.
question and answers at the end, but I'm sure there will be plenty to ask her about. But please help me welcome Zika Khamitzhanova to the stage.
Okay, how am I sounding? No feedback? Am I good? Everybody can hear me?
Yeah,
Okay,
good.
perfect. Thank you so much, Dwayne and the Valparaiso International Center, for giving me this opportunity. It's a really, just really great to be able to have this kind of a little platform to share about where I come from, and hopefully you'll learn something new today, and hopefully you'll learn something really interesting that will inspire you to continue learning. And hopefully this won't be kind of the last time you hear about Kazakhstan or learn more about it. So my name, I do go by Zika, and I've gone by that since I was like 2 years old. It's just something my mom came up with. But my full name is Zaliha, and that is a name from my father's side. I was named after my great-grandmother. And my full name, my last name is Khamitzhanova Zaliha Zhomartovna. So in our country, and in many actually former Soviet and Eastern European cultures, the part of our name is a surname. So my father's name is Zhomart, so my surname is Zhomartovna. So in our language, in the Russian language, for example, when you want to refer to someone respectfully, we don't have like the monikers like Mr. and Mrs. So my respectful reference would be Zika Khamitzhanova. So that's how people refer to me. So just a little tidbit there. Just a little disclaimer, I do not mean for my presentation to be in any way exhaustive. I just did my best to kind of give the most basic overview of things and kind of pull out some tidbits that I think are interesting, and maybe things that even if you do know something about Kazakhstan, you may not know. So please keep that in mind, and again, I would just encourage you to, to find out more if your interest is sparked today. So, okay. So right offhand, as you can see, my lovely sister, whom I would like to thank so much, Alina, again. She helped me so much with all the stuff you see, and she made one of the dishes, and it just was such a big help. Thank you so much, I love you. So there's our flag there, and that's kind of how the presentation starts. And I just wanted to give a quick overview. So we'll go over a little bit of basic facts, geography, demographics. I'll talk about the history a bit. Note on the atomic step, that is actually a book recommendation I'm going to make today, and I'll tell you why. Then we'll talk about culture and society. 2 generations, I just wanted a little tidbit to share with you guys from my father and my brother, who are of 2 generations, both who were born and raised in Kazakhstan, live here now. So that's what that's about. I'll share a little bit of my personal story, and again, thank you, Alina, for helping me. And Alina and I will speak some Russian for you guys later. Dwayne had asked for that. So, okay, Kazakhstan. So I do just real quick raise of hands. How many of you have heard or know something about Kazakhstan? Heard. Great. This is great. So just some basic stuff. So here it. Oh, that's crazy. So it is located in Central Asia. It is actually the 9th largest country in the world by land mass. So for example, it is about 4 times the size of the state of Texas. Okay? So here it is right here in green. As you can see the borders around it, the entire northern border is Russia. The Caspian Sea is to the west. To the east, we have Mongolia, China, just a little bit of Mongolia, China, and then to the south are the other countries that you have heard of that end in STAN. So Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan is down here as well. The current capital is Astana. One of the interesting facts about our country is it is considered, it has like basically the driest point in the world. It's the largest landlocked country, meaning we are the farthest away from all of the oceans. Our demographics, so the population is, it's a little bit mixed census, but it's somewhere between, it's probably a bit over 19 million, but not quite 20. So of that, and I think this is part of what kind of makes our country kind of have its own unique characteristic compared to other Central Asian or Asian countries. So the ethnic Kazakhs, like me, we make up about 70% of the population now. And that is more than before. In decades past, that would have been more like just a bit over 50. Russians make up about 15%, and then there's large vast of other people groups, including Tatars, which is another very ancient ethnic group from kind of that region of the steppe. Uyghurs, which is a group that kind of lives more to the south and closer to China. Ukrainians, Koreans, Germans, and many others. So in that way, it's one of the most diverse Asian countries that you might encounter. And by Asian, I mean East Asian, Southeast Asian, Central Asian. When you go there and you walk the streets, you're bound to see many other colors and faces, not just ethnic Kazakhs, very easily. Kazakh is the state language, is the official state language, but Russian is commonly spoken. So I'm going to talk about that like later on as well, but just a little tidbit. So because of Kazakhstan being part of the Russian Empire and then also the Soviet Union, really Russian is the first language for many people who were born and raised in our country. For me, that is the case. So when I was born there in 1982, that was the primary language that you spoke in schools. Everything was in Russian. So for me, unfortunately, Kazakh is not the native language. I do not know. When I was little, I did, because my grandparents spoke it. And so when I would spend time with them, they would speak it and teach me. But for the most part, Russian is, was for many, many, many years the predominant language. And that is changing. The Kazakh native language is becoming more and more spoken, and especially in the young generation. So that's really, really good to see. Today, if you were to travel to Kazakhstan, you would find many more Kazakh speakers than you would have even in the days of my father, when he was young, who is 73 now. And then just so you guys know, our currency is called tenge. Okay.
Quick question. Is Astana is a new capital that before was different city, right?
I will talk about that later in the
Okay.
presentation.
Got
Yep. Because there's a story there. So, okay. So I did want to kind of talk about our flag, which you see over there, and then this is our state emblem. I'm not quite sure how common that is, I guess, but we have one. And I know other countries do too. So our flag and both of our emblems, as you can see, they have some resemblances, and there's multi-layered meanings to both. So first, the color blue. It represents the sky. It represents peace and prosperity, honesty and integrity and fidelity. And one of the things that's really kind of, I think, unique, and my father actually told me about this, because that's how it feels to him too, is the fact that it's all this one color. Lots of flags have like different color backgrounds, you know, but ours is that all one background color. And what kind of it represents is the never-ending openness reflected in the hospitality and the openness of the people. The sun and kind of the gold color, which we love, and you'll see it's in my outfit as well, is kind of this representation of a life-affirming energy, of abundance, of justice, and then also of wealth. And literal grain, because that's one of the top exports of our country. The eagle spread under the sun, it's kind of spread over the steppe. The word for eagle in Kazakh is birkud. And that represents, again, just this wide open land with open-hearted people. And the eagle also represents power and insight and generosity, freedom of the people, and courage and integrity and dignity. And then there's always kind of this ornamental pattern to things. You will see that. All the things that we have that are labeled, you'll see kind of that ornamental pattern. It's on my outfit, it's in the outfits there. It's just something that has been part of an artistic expression of our people for centuries. And we feel very strongly about it. It's in a lot of places. Okay, then the emblem here. So on the top of it, we see that round crisscross part. That is the top of a yurt. A yurt is the traditional traveling home of our people. And it's still used to this day. There are still people who live the nomadic lifestyle and use yurts all over Central Asia, including our country as well. And so that kind of represents a common home and a common homeland. The winged horses in Kazakh mythology, they're called tulpars, and they represent bravery and strength. And then the star at the top represents a constant guiding light, pursuit of truth, and aspiration of a nation. Okay, I'm digging into some history. I'm sorry, I'm sucking on a cough drop, which, by the way, is saving my life right now. Thank you, ma'am. So my mouth is really dry, so I apologize if you hear it. Okay, again, super vast history, so this is gonna be like a flyby at best, okay? So as I alluded to before, our ancestors were nomads. They were part of kind of what you guys have probably already heard, just nomadic tribes of Central Asia, of the steppe. And that's whom our ancestors were. One of the tribes that has been written about quite a bit from that time is called Saki. And actually, I remember as a child, that was one of my favorite historical fiction books, is reading about these ancient peoples. One of my favorite books as a child was this book called The Golden-Haired Queen, which was a book about one of the Saki's leaders who was a woman, and she had ginger hair. And so that is actually something that, I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of the like pre-Mongolian invasion tribes of the steppes, they actually had lighter features. Blue, green eyes, fair skin, freckles, red hair. Not necessarily like European Caucasian features, but when it came to like the color of their skin and their eyes and their hair. And then, as I'm sure many of you know, the Mongolian invasion happened. And that was around the late 12th to early 13th century. And so that obviously changed the entire landscape of many nations, including ours. And so that is part of the reason why my people look like I do today. And many people, and we all do have very distinct ways of looking that kind of have an impact on that. Central Asians look very different than East Asians and Southeast, so but that's why, is because my ancestors were not like the ancestors of China and so on and so forth. So after that, kind of what ended up happening was all of the tribes kind of began, with the Mongolian invasion, basically kind of got divided into the small, middle, and great hordes. That's what they were called. And eventually they split up into what's called Hanat. And the word Hanat comes from the word Han, which you guys may be familiar with if you've heard of Genghis Khan. So in English, you say Khan. In our language, you say Han. It means leader, lord, ruler. So Hanat is like the part that they would rule. So kind of the tribes divided into those Hanats, and there were many Hans. And throughout this time, obviously there continued to be struggle over land, and the Mongols continued. There was all kinds of tribal and other territorial struggles. And this is the time when kind of Kazakhstan connection to Russia really took root. So the leader of this small horde asked basically Russia for help to repel some of these Mongolian raids. And in 1730, Russian Empress Anna Iovanovna came to the Khan side, and they actually signed like an official treaty, probably one of the first of its time for them. But that is really kind of how the process of Kazakhstan's colonization by Russia began. So that was the deal that they made with the small horde, and then by the 15th century, the middle and the great horde were all colonized by Russia, more or less, and were part of the Russian Empire. So my next little paragraph, it just covers a lot of time. So obviously, development and industrialization of Kazakhstan began to spread to more of the country, going more inward. But it's such a vast place, right? Like it was impossible, I think, to a certain degree to have all of it be industrialized. So there are many parts of Kazakhstan that did not go through the Industrial Revolution, and that there are some pockets like that still to this day. So now we kind of leave that part, and I'm going to jump to the Soviet Union. So this is where, remember, we're part of the Russian Empire, so the revolution happens, 1917, and because of kind of the chaos, right, that it was, right, first when the revolution happened, there was actually a brief amount of time where while Russia, all these things were happening, Kazakhstan was kind of autonomous for just a very small number of years. But then by 1920, it was, everybody kind of settled down. It was like, oh yeah, remember? So I came back and got us. And then by 1936, Kazakhstan was like officially declared a Soviet republic. But it was well under the Soviet rule before that. And then that's when the capital city of Almaty was established, which at the time and to this day remains the largest city in our country. It's located all the way to the south, down here. This is a map of just Kazakhstan. So in the southern parts of our country are mountainous, and they're very beautiful. And so Almaty is located there, and it is actually named after the mountains that it's surrounded by. It lies in this beautiful valley. It's one of the best times of my life visiting there. And one of the mountains they say looks like a young woman, which Alma is the name of a young woman. And then the other mountain they say looks like like a grandpa, like an older man. And Ata is the word for grandpa in Kazakh. So that's kind of a neat thing. Okay, so again, vast history, but this is something I think is important to kind of outline that happened during kind of the Soviet Union rule. So one of the major and really tragic events for our country and our people happened with the collectivization effort that the Stalin government made in the 1930s. This was basically kind of a forced industrialization and modernization of our country. So what he did is that government, they ordered basically all of the nomadic farmers and livestock herders to live together in collectives, like villages or co-op type organized places, and cultivate meat and then grow grain for like a national pot. So there was like a quota that they had to meet, and then the Soviet government decided how that would be distributed and used. And so for people who were used to a nomadic life, this was a death sentence, and this was a really harsh time. Almost 1.5 million people died during this time. This is just in the 30s. And a lot of livestock died as well. And then part of that too, between 1936 and 1938, the Kazakh intelligentsia went through a purge too. Now that is not unique. That was something that Stalin's regime did quite regularly, is they would literally purge people who they deemed not helpful, I guess, to the government, but mostly ended up being like academics and intelligentsia. So, as you can imagine, that is a lot of people who died in a very short amount of time, right? And so that left just this huge vacuum and literally empty land where like no livestock was roaming, like no people. And so into that vacuum, the Soviet government sent Russians and other ethnic groups to basically move in and set up co-op villages and things like that and begin to grow massive amounts of grain. And so that's really kind of where the robust production of grain that Kazakhstan has today, that's kind of where that started, was through that endeavor. Okay, I'm gonna skip all that, the rest of the years there. With the collapse of the Soviet Union came the independence of a lot of the Soviet republics, including ours. And so the official day of independence for Kazakhstan is December 16, 1991. And that is also the same time that the first election was held. And I very much mean my quotes. But I say that because, who was elected was Nursultan Nazarbayev. So he was the man who was appointed by the Soviet Union to rule over Kazakhstan in 1989. So then he was elected in 1991 to be the president. And basically through his reign, I mean, it's vast, obviously, like I'm covering a lot, but part of what had occurred is he just continued to amass and expand presidential power, and there were elections, but again, I'm gonna put that in very heavy quotes when I say that. And I say that to, I'm speaking to my audience, right? Like you guys are, I'm assuming predominantly American, or at least you're familiar with the way of life here. And so, for you, the word election means something very different than it would for someone from Kazakhstan, So anyway, but things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And basically what had happened, and again, this is such a short version of this, and I just encourage you to look into it. But due to a lot of turmoil and people getting killed and people uprising, basically the people of Kazakhstan kind of had it. And there was a huge uprising, and then it kind of forced Nazarbayev to resign. So he resigned his presidency in 2019, and in October of 2019, there was like an emergency election basically held, and then the current president was elected, which I'll have on another page. So to answer your question, Nazarbayev in 2019, which I think maybe this probably contributed to people just being so upset. So the capital Astana was changed from Almaty in December of 1997. And the reason for that is because Nazarbayev had this dream of building this city from scratch, like this magnum opus of his reign. He poured tons of wealth into that. I mean, it is, and so these are some of the pictures and provided by my lovely sister who has been there and can attest to this. It is a very impressive city by all accounts. Like some of the architectural feats there, you can tell like a lot of resources went into that. So basically it was kind of built from scratch to, I think, showcase Kazakhstan's wealth and power and things like that. So it changed from Almaty to Astana in '97. And then in 2019, Nazarbayev just really wanted to have something with his name on it. And so he decided to rename Astana after himself. So in 2019, it was called Nur Sultan, which is his first name. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it's kind of, even though we're talking about a completely different country than America, or we could be talking about any country really, I think, but I do think like there's some commonalities that exist in culture sometimes, and one of them I think is like powerful rich men like to put their names on things. He did. That's literally what he did, and I don't think people like that very much because that's the year he had to resign his presidency. But obviously it's a hyperbole. There's a lot more problems than that. But anyway. So Astana was named Nur Sultan from 2019, and it was renamed back to Astana in 2022. So right now, as it stands today, the capital of Kazakhstan is Astana, and it is located right here. So kind of Almaty was down here, the first capital, and Astana is right here, kind of closer to the north central area. Okay, what time is it? Okay. Sorry, I'll try so hard to be timely, guys. Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna go there. Okay, so Kazakhstan today, again, a lot of things I could talk about, but just some highlights. So the current president who was elected in October 2019, his name is Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. We have, our government system is kind of a hybrid of a presidency and a parliament. We have a two-chamber kind of legislative body. We do have a judiciary system and things like that, and local officials, but no one is elected. There's presidential elections, again, but they're like landslides, right? And the opposition is shut down very quickly. And local government officials and judges and like people in power are appointed. And it all very much depends on who you know and how much money you have and all of that. So when it comes to, I do want to talk about this because I think this is an important concept, the concept of rule of law. I feel like this is one of the things that you can kind of, when you talk about the world and you kind of look at different countries, like you can talk about, standard of living, government systems, and is there such a thing as a rule of law? So I would say, compared to America, where, pretty much everybody abides by laws, pretty regularly on the day-to-day life. But for me, how I started to think of it, and just to kind of a little caveat, I studied criminal justice and political science in college because I wanted to understand how this country works. So rule of law for me is like a spectrum, and no one has 100% rule of law, I don't think. Because there's always people, finding ways to get around it. But in our country, a lot of things do depend on your connections and your wealth and your networking. And government officials can do exercise absolute power sometimes. And most certainly the executive office did. There are a lot of actions that they took over the years, especially in Nazarbayev, that people died with impunity and no accountability. Like all the things that you think about with autocratic, authoritarian rule, Kazakhstan represents that. It's a spectrum, right? It's not lawlessness, but it's not this like perfect where like you understand everything. It's kind of in the middle. And bribes and political motivations are very much part of how things work. But I do want to say this caveat because I think unless you live in a culture like that, and if you just always lived in America, it might be hard to conceive of a notion that like being able to bribe a police officer, for example, that is just 100% and always a bad, immoral thing. So it's not quite like that. Sometimes being able to bribe means good things happen, and actually just things might happen. So just want to kind of throw that out there that like, just because you can bribe somebody doesn't mean that it's always and 100% morally wrong no matter what the situation is. And many countries operate this way, many countries. It's just kind of how the world works sometimes. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to kind of outline is the urbanization of Kazakhstan. So we actually, it's, like I said, it's a vast country. It's very, it's like really low density population, if you think about it, right? It's the 9th largest country in the world, but our population is under 20 million. Just think about that. So, there are cities, and urbanization has been happening more and more over the last few decades, and by now about 58% of the population lives in cities. But it's not proportionate in maybe kind of the way you might think. There's about 300 cities in Kazakhstan, under 300, but really 3 major cities. So the 2 capitals, the former capital Almaty and Astana, and then actually the city where I spent a lot of my childhood, which is called Karaganda, and it is, oh gosh, right here. It's kind of central Kazakhstan here. So those are kind of the 3 biggest cities. And like Karaganda has 500,000 people living in it, Almaty is about 2 million, Astana is about 1 million. So if you think about that, and then those are the 3. And then you just drastically drop after that. So when we say cities, it's definitely not in the same way that you guys might think of a city. It's very different. Okay, I do want to talk about the economy a little bit. Again, there's like classes you can take about economies of countries. But one of the things I do want to say is because of the history of our country and its current autocratic rule, all of the mineral resources and just all the natural resources that Kazakhstan has, they are vast, but they do not represent a wealth distribution. Meaning, we have like the 9th largest reserve of oil in the world. Do you know that? Right? But our country is 2nd world living standards at best. It's very rich people and very poor people. There's no really middle class. I mean, it's better now than it used to be, right? But the part of that is because all of the oil and the other natural resources, a lot of it is either heavily regulated by the government or straight up owned by it. And so the distribution kind of all those things to the population is still something that we're working on. I would say in some ways, when it comes to governments especially, Kazakhstan is a very young country in that way. And if you think about, its independence being in 91 and kind of all the things that have transpired. So, but for example, our gross, our GDP for 2022 was $225.5 billion. That compared to the US GDP of 2022 was $23.44 trillion. Think about that, the comparison of that. So like I said, with the class system, so I actually asked my brother, I was like, hey, what do like milk and eggs cost these days? so that's what you see there, I don't know if you can read, but so like for example, the cost of a loaf of bread is like 50 cents, 10 eggs is $2, a liter of milk is $1.50. Average rent in bigger cities can be anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month. But, for example, my father gets a pension, and he gets one on the higher end of things. His pension is $300 a month. There is a friend of his who lives where he lives, and she is the director of a large kindergarten facility. Her salary is $150 a month. That's it. So think about that. Like those may be cheap prices for those groceries, but you can't think about what people are earning. And the ratio of the dollar to the tenge right now, the exchange rate is $1 is 442.5 tenge. Just to kind of give you some perspective on that. And then the photos here, I do want to point out. So this is in Karaganda. This is my city. So they're very special to me. So this is both Abdirova Street, which is he was a pilot, a Kazakh pilot during World War II, who was very heroic, and he died serving to protect the country. So there's a whole street named after him that I lived on and grew up on when I lived in the city. So that's what that is. And then this is on May 9th, which is a day of victory that we celebrate for the end of World War II. So this is just a memorial march that happens in Karaganda. That's what all the people that you see. They're just holding up pictures of like their family members or people they know from the war that served in the war. Okay, this is a little note. So this is the book I'm going to recommend. It's called Atomic Step by Zika Khamitzhanova, and she is a Kazakh woman who was born and raised there and then came to America, has her PhD here. I can't remember for what institution, but I'm going to talk about this because I do think it's a very interesting tidbit of our history, and if you're interested to learn more, and it is very interesting, highly recommend this book. You can get it on Amazon, it's like under $10 there. So, I don't know how many of you know this, but during the reign of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan was one of the main places where the Soviet Union conducted nuclear tests. They were conducted in Russia, of course, on Russian soil, but for, I'm sure, a multitude of reasons, one of which being that Kazakhstan had a lot of open land, seemingly people would not be affected. But basically between 1949 and 1989, more than 700 nuclear tests were conducted in that country. And 450 of them were in this one region called Valparaiso, which is what this little red dot is, and do you see how close it is to a river? So what that means is, and the repercussions of it are lifelong. Many thousands of people died. Many people were sick. The estimated number is that 1.5 million people were affected by that. But that's probably on the low end, because the repercussions, if you think about radiation and the years that it lasts and how it affects the land and the animals and everything, was devastating. So that happened during the Soviet Union. So then basically in 1989, the reason it ended there is because of the Kazakh people, because it was just so devastating, people could not take it anymore. And so there's a huge uprising against it. And it actually started in 1986. And this was, again, one of the tragic events. So in 1986, about 30,000 students in Almaty protested the nuclear testing. And that revolt got put down like this by the KGB. Hundreds were killed, more were imprisoned, and things like that. But it started a very important step, and people had courage, and people kept pursuing the end of the nuclear testing. And so thanks to those people, and then the government came on board as well. In 1989 was the last nuclear test conducted on our soil. So, post-Soviet Union, 1981 happens, right? The dilemma is, on our soil, we actually had, and maybe some of you, some of the older generation might know this, but because this was a big deal during the Cold War, we had the 4th largest arsenal of ready-to-go nuclear weapons on our soil in 1991. Over 105 ready-to-go warheads. And then the world was like, oh, what do we do now? Because Kazakhstan declared its independence, all these nuclear weapons on our soil, so what are we gonna do? Or there was all these articles back then, is it gonna be another North Korea and all this kind of stuff. So there were some decisions that needed to be made. And then another reason kind of for the nuclear tests and all of that is because actually one of the richest resources that our country has is uranium. We are the 2nd largest deposit of uranium in the world. Basically, because of the Kazakh people and the Kazakh government, they collectively decided we don't want these. And so that's what this book really is about. It's about the Kazakh people saying we do not want to own nuclear weapons, and it's the process of disarmament and getting rid of them. And I think that's amazing. I don't know if there's any other story in the world of a sovereign nation saying, it's okay, we don't need nuclear weapons. Kazakhstan was the only one who did that, voluntarily fought and died to have that happen. So, anyway, so that whole process finished in 1995. And that's when kind of all of the nuclear weapons were destroyed, or I don't know what the proper language is. But just so that you guys know, kind of all of that, the US was involved in that whole process. And they actually made a deal with the Russians to purchase some of the kind of raw material that once you kind of dismantle these weapons, I guess there's stuff you can gather. I don't know. I'm not a nuclear scientist, clearly. Anyway, so that I just think that's such an interesting part of our history that I don't think many people know. And so anyway, so I just encourage you guys to read that book if you want to know more. And I better hurry up. Okay, I'm gonna breeze through this, guys. Sorry, culture and society. This is a picture of me. This is kind of the travel home. So I do want to talk about our language a bit, which I did already. So Kazakh is part of the Turkic language family and was written in Arabic script until about the 20th century. After the revolution, it was written in Latin and then switched to Cyrillic about two decades later. But in 2017, the Kazakh government began to transition back to the Latin script and kind of make more things in the official Kazakh language and kind of getting away from the Cyrillic script. Like I said before, being part of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union means that Russian is one of our primary languages, both spoken and written. So, like I said, it's my first language. It's what what we grew up with. And it was even my father. My father was born and raised in the city. He's 73, but because of kind of all of the history, Kazakh was just not taught in school. All of his education, all of his experience was in Russian. So even he didn't start speaking Kazakh until much later in life. When he was a youth, he didn't know it at all. So like I said, it's the official state language, and it is really cool to see that especially the use of Kazakh today is really taken to it. And they just it's just more widely spoken than it ever has been before. Okay, I did allude to this as well, but Kazakhstan is one of the most diverse Asian countries due to its history, starting with the various tribal wars and Mongol invasion, and then all of the Russian influence as well. Now, one of the reasons for that is the USSR intentionally sent mass amounts of various groups of people after especially World War II, basically like people they didn't like or persons not gratis. So there was like a huge population of Germans that were sent to Kazakhstan, Russians who kind of did not fall in, with the government, Chechens, Koreans, and others. And then also during the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan was one of the places where the gulags were built. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Yes.
So he wrote a lot of his important works in the Gulag in Kazakhstan. He was sent there for quite some time. Okay, religion. So Kazakh nomads, they followed the religion of Tengerism, which is the center of which is the sky god Tengiri. And I mean, basically, part of the reason for that is being nomads, traveling and roaming meant that they didn't build buildings. They didn't build places of worship or temples or things like that. Their god was the sky. And then other religions were introduced by other cultures. So Christian Orthodoxy through Russia, Islam, Buddhism, and others through the Mongol invasion and trade on the Silk Road and various other reasons. Now, during the Soviet Union, if you guys don't know, but part of the communist government thing was they were atheistic. There's no God, right? So there's a lot of people in Kazakhstan and former Soviet Union that didn't grow up with any religion at all, and that's a little bit part of my experience. I don't in my childhood, I don't remember really my grandma. I saw her pray a couple of times here and there from the Muslim background, but and my mom the same way. It was really pretty atheistic. When they were growing up. So today, the two main religions in Kazakhstan, kind of percentage-wise, are Russian Christian Orthodoxy and Islam. Protestant and Catholic Christianity and Judaism make up kind of a smaller number percentage, but compared to those two, those are kind of the two main religious groups in Kazakhstan. And this lovely picture here, my sister took, this is a beautiful mosque that is built in Kazakhstan. It is the largest mosque in Central Asia. And so this is kind of, again, with kind of the rise of various just kind of coming to religion, kind of out of the hangover of the Soviet Union being more atheistic, you find much more religious people in Kazakhstan now than you would have 50 years ago. And then this is kind of a little artifact of the sky religion, where they're worshiping the sun and the sky. Okay, my favorite part of culture, food. Okay, this is a picture from my sister, and that's a picture from me. You probably can't tell much about it, a little bit, but it's kind of ugly, sorry. Okay, so our food culture is awesome, because obviously I'm biased. But anyway, but because of the nomadic way that we lived, it's a lot of our food is meat dependent and kind of what, vegetables that are hardy, like root vegetables and things like that. So we actually, in Kazakhstan, we eat horse. And we drink the horse milk, we make various products out of it, and we're not the only one, there's lots of other cultures who do, I don't want to say that we're the only ones. But the horse is a really revered animal to our people for many reasons. We just love it saved our life, and it was our life in the nomadic lifestyle. So horse milk is called kumis. And kazı is a cured horse dish meat where we cure it and salt it, and then we wrap it in intestines, and then you cook that. It's so delicious. So actually, and then sheep are also eaten just as much as cow or chicken, and we are very big fans of eating the whole animal. And in fact, it's really honorary to eat the whole animal. And if you invite guests over, it's very traditional to serve the guests the head of the sheep. That's like honoring the guest. So actually, that's what this picture is. It's really hard to tell, but I made the traditional dish, which I also have written on here. It's called bish barmat, which means 5 fingers because you eat it with your fingers. It's on the bottom of it. There's a layer of dough that's cooked in this hot boiling broth that you make out of cooking all of the meat together. So there's like sheep and horse that I cooked together, and in the middle of that plate, again, you can't tell, but it's a head of a sheep that I had. So we ate its brains. Okay, so yeah, so we're big fans of fermentation and curing and things like that, and also like garlic and onion are huge in this step. Like any kind of Central Asian culture, like I remember growing up, any meal you eat, there's just like raw garlic and raw onion, and you just eat that. It's delicious. I don't do it with my friends as much because I love them, but when they're not around, I do that. Okay. And one of the things I do want to mention is because of kind of just the melting pot that our country really is, we do have a lot of influences in our food, especially from other cultures, and things that we don't even really distinguish as like, oh, that's a Korean dish and that's a Kazakh. It's just like a Kazakh dish that like is now a Kazakh dish, but like Koreans influenced it, you know. So, for example, that's one of the things I made tonight. So the carrot dish over there is called hye. And it is a carrot dish, and it is made with beef that is cooked in acid. It's not cooked with heat, it's cooked in vinegar. Okay, so it has this really tart, vinegary taste to it, but I promise you it's delicious, so try it. And then, of course, one of the things that, again, just to reiterate, we are very hospitable people, we overfeed people. In fact, it is shameful to be able to see a spot on the table, which is why this table is so full. Like, there cannot be any spots you can see. So that's like a thing when you do a table. Okay. Culture and society continued. So I did want to talk about this. So Nauruz, it's a national holiday, but it's actually an ancient holiday. It's basically celebrating the new year with the spring. It has pagan roots. It's basically this just now it's an annual festival. It's celebrated on the 21st of March and for 3 days. So people don't work for all those days. And it's just a renewal of life in nature and with people, and it's just like a time of celebration. And it stems from kind of the pagan sky religion time. So this is actually pictures that you see here. My brother, who lives in Almaty, he is a brilliant designer and artist, and he was actually commissioned by the president of Kazakhstan, like the office, the executive office, to do design work for the Nauruz festival that takes place in the capital. This is the 2nd year he's been asked to do this. So this is actually photos he sent me. So this is like traditional wear. That's a real eagle there, but like people dress up, and I don't know if you can tell, but that bigger photo, there's a massive open yurt in the middle of it, and my brother designed that, and he designed like all of the installations around it, so it's really cool. But anyways, just Google Nauruz and you can see tons of cool videos. Okay. All right. So this, I'm just gonna read this because I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is kind of where I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about my dad and my brother, my dad is 73 and my brother is 44, so they're definitely very different generations. And I kind of asked them some specific questions for today, but just throughout like my life and like being in touch with them and things like that, like they've just been so such a valuable just have such a valuable place in my life, and I've learned so much through both of them, so I'm just really grateful. So just to give you a little like tidbits, so like if you think about my dad being 73, so he grew up during the communist era. So when he was a kid, he went to the communist camps. I don't know if you guys ever heard of them, but the youth, like that's like kind of what the youth did, is you went to these camps and you were taught all of the ways of the party, but really what you were taught in those camps is work ethic. You were taught to work. And that's what a lot of it is. You did that from like the age of 10 until you finished school at 17 or 18. My dad went to university, which again was very hard to do. You had to pass a lot of tests to get there. And he was considered academic because he taught. But because he was considered an academic, he was ostracized because, again, the Communist Party just really frowned on the intelligentsia. And being in the Communist Party was very important. Like, that's how you got ahead in life, is if you had an important position in the Communist Party. And so my dad was like not allowed in for a long time because he was an academic. And my brother, he obviously grew up, was born there, and because of his age, he witnessed that transition of when the Soviet Union ended and kind of what happened after. And it was called at the time wild capitalism, because that's literally what happened. It was like floodgates. Like, the Soviet Union ended, and then there was this just huge influx of Western goods and ideas and peoples, and just this and migration. Like, people from all over Europe and America were able to come to the former Soviet Union. They weren't really able to before, so it was just wild. And my brother got to see all of that and experience it. So yeah, so this is what I asked them. I just was curious, and I was like, if you guys could say, if you had the audience of American people, what would you say to them? Like, what would be like one thing one or two things that you would want to say to them about our country? And so this is what my dad said. So again, remember, he's 73 and my brother's 44. So my dad talked about how he thinks Kazakhstan is perceived, and what he hears a lot is that Kazakhstan is perceived as a Muslim country, just kind of defined as that. Which, of course, like, we do have Muslim believers in the country, but his kind of thing was, he believes that it's really important to understand the history of the place and to understand the history of Kazakhstan, which has much more ancient pagan roots and has always been open to many religions, and is still to this day. It is one of the most acceptable countries to other religions. In fact, what my dad was saying is recently he has observed people reverting back to the pagan religion, and he has seen an increase in just the youth being interested in religion at all. And part of that, I think he thinks, has to do with kind of just, there's nothing else to believe in. Like, the government sucks, and it's like, so yeah. And then the other important thing my dad wanted to talk about was Ukraine and Kazakhstan's relationship with Russia. So just to, there's all kinds of obviously opinions about this, but this is what he wanted to express, and I just want to honor his wish. So he just very adamantly, and he's told me this from the beginning, that to say that a vast majority of Kazakh people support Ukraine, and they're afraid that Kazakhstan will be next. And he was just kind of talking even through how there was even a change in how some, not all, but some Russian people treated Kazakhs when the war started. Just he himself, just more disrespect, a little bit shorter, kind of like, where Russia's always been the big brother, and Kazakhs has always been the little brother who has no power or anything to do anything. So anyways, but one of the things my dad talked about that he's noticed is recently over the last like 6 months or so even, that kind of treatment has decreased. Because now that Ukraine has been fighting, and it's like lasting 2 years, like the perception is changing, and people are seeing that maybe things are not going to turn out kind of how everybody thought they might, So it's just an interesting thing, and we are very much, Kazakhstan is very much in that shadow, and it has always been in a way. So, and then my brother, who is very modern sensibilities. He's, like I said, he's a designer, he's an artist, So what he wanted to talk about is the influence of America on a country like Kazakhstan, even though, he said probably to Americans, we're like in the middle of nowhere, like most people probably don't even know like what Kazakhstan even is. But it is important to understand how much influence the United States really has in the world and on Central Asia. Kazakhstan is a young country, and relatively speaking, especially when it comes to governance and ideals. So my brother talked about just how open it is, and he would want you guys to know that. And that though tourism isn't something necessarily that's happening in Kazakhstan very much, it definitely can. And I think, kind of what his desire is in mind is too, is that people visit Kazakhstan and see for themselves how open the people are, even though they live under an autocratic authoritarian government. Like the spirit of the people does not match some of the hardships. So, okay, a little bit of my story. I'm gonna try to be super brief. Sorry, it's like 8 o'clock already, Dwayne, I'm sorry. This is my last slide though, I promise. Am I good? Okay. So a little bit of my story. So like I said before, I was born in 1982, and I came to America in 1996. So I was born and raised there for 14 years. And I too remember the change from the Soviet Union to, when it dissipated. And obviously I was a child, so for me, the things that I remember are quite different, right? Like I remember, oh my goodness, I don't have to wear a uniform to school anymore, and I don't get in trouble for like not braiding my hair correctly, which happened a lot. And things like that. And obviously like, I saw just I remember to this day, my mom traveled to Moscow, to the first McDonald's that opened there, and brought me back from Moscow, okay, from Russia, a burger, like fluid. I ate that. But I will never forget how it tasted, the texture of sesame seeds on a bun. Like never seen that before in my life, So stuff like that, just really sticks out. And how I came to be in America is really thanks to my mom. My mom, our mom, is such a pivotal and huge part of. She's the only reason I'm here. She, I think by whether consciously or subconsciously, I think by the providence of the Lord, she decided to immigrate to America, and she just kind of knew that things were not going to be okay later, and so she made that decision, and it was a very hard decision to make, and she went through a lot of pain to execute it. That's when I came to America in 1996. I arrived on July 20th, and I started high school 2 weeks later. I spoke very little English. I probably spent the first 2 years of high school just like bringing a dictionary with me everywhere. And then I came here by myself for about 6 months. It's just kind of the nature of paperwork and flights and such. And then my mom arrived later, and she was actually pregnant with Alina at the time. And so my baby sister was born when I was 15 here in the United States. And then they had to go back when Alina was 3 for about 8 years. And so then they were gone from 2000 to 2008. And then they came back in 2008. So my story here is I went to high school here. I went to college at Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana. I have a degree in criminal justice and political science. I worked in social work in various mental health fields. When I moved to Valparaiso in 2008, I came here to work in the developmental disabilities field, and that's how I got connected with Special Olympics, like Denise said. But over time, I decided that I wanted to pursue more entrepreneurial endeavors, and so I began to teach myself various skills. And so what I do now in business management is all kind of self-taught, but it's awesome. I love doing what I do. It gives me a lot of freedom to do other things like this and prepare for it during work. I was working on this presentation like all week long. It's a really complicated story, and if you want to know, like, I'll probably literally have to go out for coffee with you because it will take forever. But for various reasons, my immigration status here in America today is DACA. So for those of you who don't know that, it's a program, it's for deferred childhood arrival. So because I arrived here as a child, as a minor, I'm given reprieve from deportation. It's a program that I have to apply for every 2 years, and it provides me with an employment authorization, which is how I can work and have a driver's license and pay taxes. I do have a Social Security card and number because I came here early enough, but that's kind of the gist of how I'm here and how I hopefully will continue to be here, but who knows what the future holds. And really the last tidbit I want to say to you guys, which I said before, is just come visit. The best way to learn about a place is to go there. I can talk to you, you can have coffee with me every day, and there is no amount of talking that can relate to you all of the things I've talked about and not talked about. And honestly, for Americans, visiting Kazakhstan is pretty simple. You don't need a visa, you just go and be there for 30 days without a visa. And you just need your passport, obviously. And flights there are not that expensive. Like round trip flights can be as cheap as $1,500 or $2,000 at most. If you go to the two major cities, Almaty and the capital Astana, you are bound to find English speakers. So even like today, like and lots of people work, especially in the capital city, from all over the world. So yeah, I love my culture. Obviously, I love where I come from, and that's what I would say is please go visit it. So that's it. So I described one of the dishes that we have over there. The other one in the crock pot is just kind of a condensed version of, it's a lamb. I just made it into like little bite-sized meatballs, but it's like a lamb cooked with lots of onions and fresh dill and things like that. And then my sister made chop chop, which is this dish made out of dough that you fry and then you cover in honey. It's so good. And then one of the most important parts of our culture, which I don't talk about, I forgot, is tea. We love tea. We drink tea. Like my mom, on a 90-degree day in America, she'd be like, oh, I'm so hot, I'm gonna make some hot tea. I'm like, what? Like literally, she would like make hot tea and then it's 90 degrees. Anyway, so Alina, God bless her, actually made you guys, she brewed some tea and she will serve you it. So if you're interested, there's milk over there and tea, and she will serve you guys kind of how we do it. So if you're willing to try some, it's over there.
Do not miss out on their cooking. Do not miss out on it.
Plug. Okay, sorry.
All right, thank you very much, Zika. That was awesome. Let's give a round of applause. So, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine that lives in Valparaiso, I said, hey, are you interested in coming? And I was going to be a little cheeky, assuming he knew nothing about Kazakhstan, and kind of throw him under the bus. And he's a pilot, and he said, oh yeah, I've been to Kazakhstan over a dozen times just for my side business, for pleasure. And so I couldn't, I haven't been to Kazakhstan, so he got me there. And I said, well, okay, prove it. Can you give me one tidbit about it? So I want to see if this is true. So it's a fact check.
Okay.
He tells me that
hopefully I can check this back.
that the word cosmonaut, like astronaut or space seeker, that comes from Kazakhstan. Is that totally made up? Or
So Kazakh means wanderer. Kazakhstan, I should have talked about that. So Kazakhstan, Stan is like the Turkic, it's derived from Turkic language, the background. It means like place or land, and Kazakh means wanderer. So cosmonaut, my guess would be comes from that same root, but it's a wanderer of space. Does that make sense?
Okay. So, right, Lee, if you're watching this, it sounds like you're right, but
I'll have to do more research.
Triple check that. That food sounds really appetizing. I really love that you guys prepared it. And just keep in mind, for those who fancy themselves leaders in the community, as Zika referred to, you'll be given the sheep's brains and the horse head. Okay.
Actually, if there was any horse here, I would be eating it, sorry. Because I don't get to have it very often.
And isn't it amazing that she didn't speak English much until she was in high school? That's incredible, seriously. And I say that because, remember, bribery is very big in your culture, so, for being nice and saying how good your English is.
How about if I ever play against volleyball against you, I'll let you have a point.
Thank you. That's so sweet of you.
But can I say something about that actually?
Yes.
I can't really explain why I don't really have an accent, but honestly, sometimes I wish I did. I really do, because I don't know if you guys have heard other immigrants talk about this, but sometimes I have experienced this, is I'm treated differently the more comfortable someone is with me. And if I have an accent, that makes me less comfortable to be around. And you learn this very quickly as an immigrant. So when my mom lived here, wherever we went, if she talked first, we would be treated very differently than if I talked first.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right? But so sometimes I kind of wish I did, because it'd be interesting to see, like sometimes I feel like how people treat me depends on how much I can assimilate into this culture. And the closer I am to white, no offense, the better I'm treated. And so when I sound like this, I'm treated differently than if I had an accent. So I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like I love the English language. I think it's awesome actually, and I read a ton, and I submerge myself in the culture. But
Yeah, so speaking of accents and language, Lena, come on over. And
yeah, sorry.
they're going to speak Russian, which I'm presuming will have a regional accent to it.
Well, it's gonna be more like I speak English 90% of the time. So when I talk to my dad and my brother, they're like, "Oh, you have an accent."
Have a normal conversation.
Давай просто поговорим о еде.
Окей.
Как чай? Сколько ты полила?
Я полила где-то 20 стаканов. Но думаю, надо больше
Посмотрим,
чувствовать людей. Да.
Думаешь, сказать им, что ли, про кофеине, что они не будут спать?
Не.
Не надо?
Пусть
Окей.
они будут думать о Казахстане все лучше.
Okay.
Got a feeling they were laughing about me or the corner.
I just asked her if we should tell you guys that there's it's caffeinated tea, so you guys will. What is the top? She was like, no, don't.
What does that say?
What is the title on the map?
What does that say? What's the title on the map say?
Oh, this is like political administrative map of the Republic of Kazakhstan. So this is like all its regions and things like that.
So most of you coming, who thought that all she was going to talk about was Borat? And she didn't even mention him once. How was that film treated in your country?
Not well.
Oh no, it's a joke. And to be totally frank with you guys, I have definitely had encounters with people who are like, oh, Borat, and all that shows is their ignorance. You know, like if that's your only point of reference about my country, A, you don't understand what the filmmaker was doing. It's not a movie about Kazakhstan. He just picked our country at random. It's a satire that he's making about lots of different places. You know, so yeah, I mean, it's not offensive because I understand the filmmaker's intent, but it is it can be offensive when that's people's only point of reference and they believe that that's how life is in our country. Like, that's ridiculous. Come on.
Right. So seriously, you guys can be ambassadors for Kazakhstan because you know so much more about it, and it's a fascinating place, isn't it? And Zika's a fascinating gal. So, all right, we've got some time for questions and answers. So let's see, you wanted to start?
I may have answered.
I thought you might be interested to know that I'm the retired director of international studies at Valparaiso University, and starting around 2008, we got several students from Kazakhstan.
I heard that.
Very
yeah,
good
here and
students.
there, yeah.
Engineering, they were top notch. They had to go to Interlink
Yeah.
to improve their English, but it wasn't too bad when they got here.
Yeah.
And they were all funded by the oil companies.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
They
so
gotta
they were all full paying. A lot of times they think that international students come here and we give them scholarships. There were no scholarships. They got all their money from the Kazakhstan oil companies. They were excellent students.
Good. I'm glad that oil money is being used for something good.
If I decided to visit your
Yes.
country, how many hours would I have to spend on the plane to get there?
Good question. Alina, did you hear it?
Yeah. So there is no nonstop flight from the U.S. Into Kazakhstan.
So actually, I married an American man, Nathan, and his parents are here tonight. And the four of us are going to go visit Kazakhstan this September for them to meet my family. And our flight is going to take us to the Middle East. So we're going to go Chicago, Dubai, Kazakhstan. There's about a 15-hour flight to Dubai, and about a 5-hour flight into Kazakhstan. You can either take that route to go through Turkey or UAE, or you can go through Europe. And I've done that through Warsaw a couple of times. You fly in to Poland, that's about an 11-hour flight, and then you have about a 7-hour flight to Kazakhstan. So, and then you lose 12 hours because of the time difference.
Yep.
So really,
So and it's ahead. So from the time right now, you add 12 hours, and that's what time it is back home.
So you really will, if you leave today, you'll arrive 2 days later.
Yep.
I really like that cultural aspect that you take your spouse after you've been married many years to meet the family, because if they don't like them, it's just too late to do anything about it, so.
You didn't mention anything about the relationship between, we hear of the Uyghurs here a lot, and China. What is your opinion of the relationship?
In that area like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an oppressed people group. It's an oppressed people's group, you know, and there's a lot, I think, wrong being done against them. The Kazakhstan government's involvement with it, I'm really not quite sure exactly what they have done or have not done. But as far as Kazakh people, they are very open to them. Like, there's no dispute about like that they should have a place to live and they should be treated with dignity and things like that. You know, it's much more geographically political. And but unfortunately, the thing is, even though I shared with you guys stories about how the people of Kazakhstan made a difference in certain things, those are like outliers. You know, people in America have much more power to make things happen that they want to happen. So even if Kazakh people were upset or outraged by the treatment of the Uyghur group, there's not much really they can do. They don't have voting power or the power, you know. So go ahead, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Do you get along with China well?
I mean, we trade, they're one of the main countries that Kazakhstan trades with. But yeah, no, there's no animosity. Kazakhstan doesn't really have any hostile relationships with any country. But part of that has to do with its position and its lack of power and lack of military and lack of, again, we like denuclearized ourselves. So.
You got a lot of oil.
We do, but that doesn't mean that we can, or that the government is choosing to use it in a way that is going to benefit the people and listen and hear the people. That's what I was saying. It's like the distribution of wealth is not appropriate or benefiting, and all the rich people can have all the power and all the decisions.
No military at all.
Oh, we do have a military, but it's not, yeah, it's not like,
Powerful.
yeah, it's not powerful, yeah.
I have two questions. I understand that the largest spaceport in the world is in Kazakhstan, the largest spaceport in the world is in Kazakhstan, probably run by the Russians. How does that work?
That is a really good question. I think you are correct. Honestly, I don't know that much about it, but one of the, so Yuri Gagarin, that was the first man in space. That was all happened that was launched from from that spaceship that you're talking about. I mean, yeah, Russia is deeply involved in Kazakhstan affairs, deeply. It is such a interdependent relationship but how Kazakh people feel about it is irrelevant. How the Kazakh government feels about it is as long as they will continue the whatever kind of relationship that they need to continue. You know what I mean? Like, even if they didn't like that Russia was running that station on our soil, like, there's not much they can do. Like, what can they do?
And my second question has to do with trade with foreign countries. They're limited, I mean, it's a landlocked country, so obviously the sea is not an avenue to get things in, so it must be rail, probably only from Russia, or how does that work?
So Russia, China, and obviously the more southern countries are like the main trade partners. And yes, there is a very wide railroad system, for sure, and that's how a lot of it is done. But yeah, but we do export grain to other parts of the world. I mean, I assume that there's just better infrastructure for that, and maybe like trucks are used, or even flights. But also, you can go through Russia or to the Caspian Sea. You know, like, there's probably ways that they use trains and boats and things like that as well.
I had a specific question, but I just wanted to comment that the American government was a little sloppy when it came to radiation. But the Soviets were infinitely worse. I mean, if you were a sailor aboard a nuclear-powered Russian submarine, good chance you'd die of radiation sickness. But in any case, Putin, in terms of the way he's acting. He very often seeks to exploit dissatisfied Russians in the former Soviet republics. The latest I've seen is Russians in Moldova contacted him and said, we're unhappy with the way we're being treated here. How's that working in your country?
Yeah, so my father and I talk about that quite a bit. So he has noticed it's just a trend over the last probably even 5 years. There have been more, not just necessarily even Russians, but people who live in Russia migrating to Kazakhstan, kind of the northern parts, like here and along here. Are some Kazakh people, like my dad, concerned about that? For sure. But would that concern be there even if that migration wasn't happening? Yes. The reality is that if there was a move by the Russian government to take over Kazakhstan or to assimilate it into whatever plan Putin has for the world, I'm not sure how much Kazakhstan will be able to do about it. And so I think that concern is there, regardless of the number of ethnic Russians in Kazakhstan. Because I think part of your question, sir, I think the presupposition there is that there's some sort of logical reason that Putin has for building his empire. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think he needs a certain number of Russians in a country to say, I'm gonna go claim that country. I think if he wants to do it, he will. You know what I'm saying?
He's that kind of guy.
Yeah, so like, if Russians in Kazakhstan were to call him up and say, hey, come get us, maybe he would, but I don't think that that's relevant. I think like the number of Russians in Kazakhstan is not necessarily a direct correlation to what might happen in the future, is what I'm saying. It's much more arbitrary than that.
I understand your country's government, they maintain good relations with Moscow, but when it comes to Ukraine, they're very standoffish. You know, they're not, what I've read is that they're keeping their distance from Moscow when it comes to Ukraine.
There's been a lot of passive-aggressive silence. There was one instance where the president of Kazakhstan said something regarding Ukraine but it wasn't like direct. Yeah, I mean, it's all you have to be very careful. And I'm not saying this to say that like, oh, Kazakhstan is good and Russia is bad. No, like, Kazakhstan has a lot to benefit from Russia. Nursultan Nazarbayev had a very close relationship with Putin. So don't get me wrong. I am not saying that Kazakhstan government is good and Russian government is bad. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is so complicated and so interconnected, and there's so much benefit that the Kazakh president and his family, then they were building power and wealth that depended on that relationship, and they took full advantage of it. So there's blame to go around.
There's another group of people that are coming towards you right now. They're building or rebuilding the Silk Road from China. Will that come through your country?
I'm not quite sure who you are referring to, but maybe I'm not as familiar with what specific you're talking about, sir. I'm sorry, but yeah, trade with China is always something that's like they're one of our predominant trade partners. So I'm sure it will. If there's something that is happening that affects trade, I'm sure it will come through.
Okay. All right, from one beautiful dress to another, this young lady, look at her dress here. We really like that. And she has a question.
What did you do for fun when you were at Russia?
Oh. When I was a kid, you want to know what I did when I was your age? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we played outside a lot. So I grew up with my grandparents a lot. I lived in a village where I didn't have toys, but I had all of the outdoors to play with. So I literally played with chickens and horses and cows and in rivers and in forests. So we just made up our own imagination games, my cousins and I, and that's what we did. We spent, when the sun came up, we were outside, and we were outside until the sun came down. That's what we did.
No bicycles?
Not in the village, really, no. No, there's no roads, really.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, not in the village. I mean, like dirt roads, but not like, yeah. And yeah, I didn't really learn how to ride a bicycle. My sister and I have a thing with bicycles. You know.
Is your country divided up into states like the United States
No.
is? No?
Just regions.
Okay.
It's more like, these are regions. And
Do they each have a capital?
no. Yeah, it's more akin to, I would, the kind of the analogous would be like counties in Indiana, like that.
Yes, if you played outside a lot, I was wondering what your climate is like.
Yeah, so there is I mean, it's a big country, right? So in the south, it is pretty warm most of the time. They don't really experience winters like we do, but kind of central to north, it's four seasons, but the winters are long. And because we're so far away from all the oceans, I actually love our climate. It's super dry. There's almost no humidity. So that was actually one of the biggest adjustments in living in Indiana. I was like, how do you breathe? But like, it's really cold in the wintertime. Like winter can last for 4 to 5 months. But even though it's so cold, you can be out there because it's so dry. And like you can breathe and you can do things and you can walk on snow with like shoes made out of camel hide and they will never get wet because the snow is that cold and like dry. It's incredible.
Yeah, actually, 2 seasons more or less, because it is super hot and dry
Yes.
in the summer.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah, I guess
Astana
spring-
is the second coldest capital in the world.
Yeah, like especially up here. So I was born in this region. I was born in a village up here. And yeah, we had like really brutal winters, but I love it. Like winter's my favorite season. Mhm.
And remember the kind of nomadic, so out in yurts in the coldest spots in the world. That's pretty amazing. So, okay, any last question here? Yes.
What is the region of Salina? What is the grain region?
Do you see it on here? Where do you see it?
I don't know. What is in Soviet period was like Salina was a lot of grains.
Grains?
Grains.
It's probably gonna be here then.
Пшеница или
Да, пшеница. А какой город там был?
Целиной называли.
Ой, я не знаю, простите, пожалуйста. Но я могу после
Ну,
я по телефону.
урожай убирали.
Наверняка где-то
Sorry,
здесь.
speak Russian. I'm asking what is a region of we call like Celina is the same like state of Texas has a lot of grains, it's flat like right. So Kazakhstan has that one region Celina.
Я посмотрю после.
And I was asking like
Я не знаю.
Ukraine's got a lot.
oh same in Ukraine, but that's not Ukraine. Talking about Kazakhstan, they got a lot of
Wheat.
seem like Ukraine very good soil right there and a lot of grains.
My guess is it would be like here, closer to where, this is where kind of predominantly where the grain, not, because it's mountainous,
Okay.
too cold, so it'd be like here. This is where the most river structure is, and closer to the sea. So climate-wise, I think it's probably gonna be in this region. But I can look it up after, I'll Google it.
I just have a simple question. I showed us a couple of pictures, one of that Taj Mahal looking building in one of the big cities. Looked pretty modern, there was a roadway, I just wanted, people drive on the same side of the highway as they do here?
I don't know if today they do. Yeah, today, yeah. When I was growing up, like driving, like very, very little driving. Like, and infrastructure has increased a lot in the last 20 years, like a lot. When I was growing up, like if you wanted to go from a city to city, you took a train because there was like not really any roads. But today, you can drive from a city to city.
Is the nomadic lifestyle completely gone there?
No. So there is still a lot of the country that in pockets that people do live off of the steppe, or they live in villages that have like very little, you know, they don't have like plumbing, or they might not have electricity, or they might have collective electricity or things like that. I mean, I couldn't tell you the percentage, I didn't research that for what it is today, but I know there's still people who live that way. And again, part of it is because it's just such a vast place. and so undensely populated. 20 million people living all up in here, 58% of whom live in cities, so the other do not.
And the yellow area you haven't pointed to, that looks like a big area with very little population possibly.
What, this right
The
here?
yellow area, yeah, I don't know how many.
Oh, this one? Oh, all of this yellow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the
You
concentration.
said the three biggest cities are.
Yeah, the three biggest cities are here, and there's some here, but yeah, this would be much less densely populated than this right here.
I had a question. Is Kazakhstan still a communist country today?
It is not,
Okay.
but it has a lot of things about it that can remind you of living there. For sure.
Is there a graffiti everywhere? Somebody mentioned Moldova, and there's graffiti everywhere.
There's probably some somewhere, I don't know.
Not everywhere.
Not everywhere, there's some. Yeah.
I'm from Moldova. I don't think there is graffiti anywhere. So.
Really? I saw wrong videos.
Could you build a snowman in the snow?
I could build the best snowman, Aria. I'm the best snowman builder. If we ever get the right amount of snow here, I'll build a snowman with you, I promise.
Can your dad and brother come here?
I mean, they did come to visit me once, but they don't want to. They're good. Yeah.
All right, so you can stay afterwards, socialize, feel free to help out with removing